Thanks for waiting. So this session is not really about a specific tool. It's more just a high-level overview of how to think about developing an AI strategy. And that could mean adopting new tools, building a new tool, automation in general, but it's sort of a high-level overview of how to start thinking about AI in a different way. So we have 45 minutes. I'm going to go through some of this pretty quick. But we're going to focus around 7 key ideas, 7 problems and 7 solutions. You want to see me differently? Okay, stay here? Okay, great. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of an intro. What's the problem? We're going to spend some time on why people fail with AI, why people fail in adopting AI. We're going to talk 7 solutions, and then a little bit of a wrap-up and Q&A if we have time. This is just a quote from somebody I find interesting, William Deming. Learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. This is a man that sort of helped rebuild Japan after the war, sort of a systems thinker, industrial engineer, but his philosophy around like building efficient systems is one to look into when you're thinking about how AI will be implemented in design and manufacturing. Yeah, so this is just a little bit about me. I'm a product manager at Autodesk. I joined here about 1.5 years ago. My background is actually mostly in design engineering. I worked in different areas of hardware. And then in the last 5 years, it's really been about implementing automation into design and manufacturing in different places and building design tools here at Autodesk now. I'm going to start with the end. So the 3 key ideas that I want you to take away from this is, in order to leverage AI better, to build effective AI strategies, you can remember 3 simple ideas. You need to manage attention better, you need to curate your context, and you need to refine your taste. And everything about this talk is about those core ideas. By manage attention, what I mean is you need to find a new balance between what's a human task and what's a machine task. By curate concept, I mean, think about the core assets of your company, the data you have, the heritage, the knowledge that exists as implicit knowledge within all of your workers or factory workers, etc. And then your taste, right? Especially as designers. You have a specific taste learned through years of practice. That's your judgment. AI is a prediction machine. It makes prediction really cheap. That increases the value of your judgment, right? So the judgment, how you define quality of an output, is the sort of key creative skill, the filter for the future. So those are the core ideas, but what do you do about it? What can you effectively think of as tasks to take away from this? Number 1, you have to analyze your workflows. What's all the different work you do, and how can you rebalance that given the tools that are changing? We talked a lot about AI in the last couple of days, and you're going to hear a lot more about AI in the coming months. That's going to change rapidly. But what isn't going to change are the human tasks. You need to figure out that yourself, and how you balance between those different cognitive abilities. The curation of context, right? You need to become a better steward. Or you don't need to, but I'm suggesting you do. Become a better steward and curator of all the context within your organization, right? Your team's context within your company, within your team, you as an individual. How can you manage your data, your tacit knowledge, your design history in a different way? And then also refining how you judge things, how you judge the output from yourself and others. So the main idea is to just admit to ourselves that every company has an AI strategy deficit, right? It's very common. And this is very common as well, right? Everybody has probably heard from some executive, okay, we need to become 20% more efficient, but there isn't really a specific guidance on how to do that, right? You've probably heard in the last couple of weeks, especially a lot of tech companies claiming, okay, we're AI first, and we're mandating the use of AI. We're mandating it for every task. Some companies like Shopify said, okay, we're not going to hire anybody else. unless you can prove that an AI can't do this work, right? So this is becoming like a mandate in many companies. And that's a problem because it's creating fast reactions, and fast reactions lead to grift, right? There's a lot of consulting companies that are saying, hey, this is an incredible opportunity to make money, which it is. But they have many people that don't know anything about your context, and maybe not as much as you might about AI defining your strategy for you. So the question or the onus turns back to the user, to the people actually doing the work, to think through what's our context, what's our process, how can we define the strategy from the bottom up. So again, these three concepts, right? Look within, attention selects, context frames, taste judges, right? The key idea here is AI is quickly becoming a commodity. It already is. The value comes from how you manage this attention, context, and taste within your work, within your daily tasks. So, as the title said, we're going to talk about 7 reasons the strategies fail, 7 things you can do about it. The first one is misunderstanding, right? Maybe nobody in your team or people feel they don't speak the language of AI. It feels too abstract or overhyped. Teams maybe don't understand what it is or what it does. Feels overwhelming or irrelevant. People feel they're going to be made redundant, right? Let's not open this can of worms yet. There's going to be backlash if we share these ideas. Maybe if we adopt too much AI, people will be afraid of layoffs. Then there's a problem of prioritization, right? We don't know where to prioritize AI, automation in general. Don't know where to start. It gets pushed aside. Not really seen as urgent. The value prop isn't clear, right? It's not communicated very in detail. There's maybe an experiment, but you don't see the path to measurable value, right? No metrics, no movement. Dramatic past, right? We tried this once. We built a chatbot or an analytics dashboard, but it flopped, so there's skepticism. No champion, no owner, right? You need executive leadership or an executive advocate for your work. You don't, so the initiative becomes orphaned. Your automation, your adoption of a new tool or process gets limited commitment. And the last one is limited resources, right? We're not Google. We don't have a data science team. We don't know how to experiment with this stuff. We don't have any internal knowledge or any idea about how to evaluate these tools. So a lot of people feel they're too understaffed to explore and they're sort of waiting. So the rest of this talk is basically what's the solution to these problems, right? With misunderstanding, at a high level, simplify the complexity. So the next couple slides, I'm just going to go through a very high level deep dive. It's a huge field. There's a lot to learn in AI. Some of you might be familiar with some of these concepts, but I just want to sort of simplify the current trend. At a high level, traditional software, you code the rules and it follows them. Okay, you input rules or you create an input plus those rules and you get a specific output, and that output is something that's predictable and fixed, right? With machine learning, you feed it examples, it finds patterns, you then give it a new input, and the output is something that's learned from the pattern. It's a flexible and probabilistic output. It's not always discrete. And fundamentally, that's the difference. They improve by learning from lots of examples and predicting the output. They update, an AI model updates its understanding based on the error of its predictions. And by doing that over and over and over again, you learn something new about the world, whatever your specific domain is. When you think about, okay, how do these things think? How do they process the world? Whether you have images or models or text or code, basically all these systems translate these things into strings of numbers. That process is processed through the model. New strings of numbers are generated and they're translated back into content. It's a simplified abstraction, but that's basically the process. So the main way of thinking about this is when you're trying to build new AI systems, you have to find out what's the best type of information to translate into numbers and what's the thing to be generated for our use case. And then when you think about how you're using these things, at least the current trend is something called next token prediction. So the model is looking at the past things that have been generated or text that's been given to it, and it's predicting the next value. All of these machines are prediction machines. The prediction is becoming very cheap, but this can also apply to any sequence of information. So from sequences of text or sequences of numbers created by image, created for images, etc. Okay, so what is really changing? Like, why are these tools improving? There's something that's referred to as the context length or token window, and what that refers to is the number of tokens, the number of chunks of information you can put into a model at once, and this token window is dramatically expanding. Right? In the last couple of years, it's turned into or transformed from a couple of words to sentences to full books. To full libraries of tokens, and that's sort of one of the main driving factors to the new types of experiences that have been developed and are rapidly expanding. But what's really driving this? There's several converging industries. It's almost become it is becoming a geopolitical topic that's improving accelerating the rate of improvement for AIs. So 3 main categories. One way you can think about this is improving chips, right? The GPUs that are being created, the whole industry that supports creating GPUs. So computing infrastructure, algorithms as well, and better software, right? And these feedback loops are accelerating to a rate of change that's pretty staggering, right? These 3 categories, algorithms, chips, and infrastructure, they both have different relative rates of improvement, but the key idea here to remember is that in 4 years, each of them will have roughly improved 100 times, which leads to a roughly 1,000,000 times improvement in 4 years. So the amount of things you can generate, whether it's code, CAD, or content, is sort of beyond our comprehension at this point. So the last thing to say here with the rainbow is, you're not too late. This is the beginning of all this, right? So the question really becomes, how do we manage this stuff, and why are these things getting better, right? So the next couple of slides, I go into a little bit of a framework on how to think about that, specifically as it relates to improving user experiences. So yeah, bigger brains, bigger senses, faster reflexes, more charming personality, almost for free and almost at once. So bigger brains, what do I mean by that? Tool use, memories, APIs, we are creating these things like agentic behavior, right? So it's creating action in AI. There's many different things you can do with these. Basically, AIs that are using multiple tools at once, having extensive memory in terms of your use of them, and autonomously working on tasks on your behalf. So this is sort of contributing to the sensation that these things are getting smarter, and that's essentially because they are, in a certain extent. They have better senses in the fact that they're multimodal, right? They have an experience of the real world, seeing, reading, and writing, etc., that leads to these interactive, multi-sensory capabilities. Faster reflexes, right? The latency in these tools is dramatically reducing. Fast prediction speed, real-time interaction, that's going to be embedded in every type of experience. We talked about this already, right? Massive context windows. It's leading to sort of, you can think of it almost like RAM, right? They have a better short-term memory, remembering your context, remembering your questions, incorporating a lot of relevant information, sort of understanding the nuance of your context while you're using them. And then, charming personality, you can sort of experience this in a certain extent, but sort of the result of fine-tuning to your context, and making it feel like you're talking to a person. And then the last concept of like these things almost being free. This is an analogy from the CEO of Anthropic. He likes to talk about using AI like communicating to an island of PhDs, right? If you were going to make a telephone call to an island of 10 million PhDs, you're going to have to ask a very specific question to get a quality answer, right? If you're hiring anybody or working with any teams, the quality of your instruction leads in big part to the quality of your results. And that's something that we need to bring into the majority of our workflows. So yeah, this is the worst it'll be. I mean, the core idea here is that content generation is going to get really cheap, right? Text generation, code generation is getting extremely cheap. That's going to move its way into CAD. It's still early days in terms of generating CAD, but it seems like a matter of time. So what's the key takeaway here, right? Again, back to this concept: attention, context, taste. This is sort of the premium skills of the future. Knowing what to ask for your context, knowing what supporting data or information is relevant, and being able to judge quality for your specific context. The key theme here is that these are very human traits. Things that maybe don't require you to focus so much on technology, but focus on what do you want to create, what's important to you. Okay, second problem, fear of redundancy, right? Again, be more human. Focus on what you can control. You cannot control the rate of change in AI. You can control how you communicate what's interesting to you, what your tastes are, what's relevant to you. To think of this more as a merger, right? How can you best merge with this technology and not fight it, okay? So how do you do that? Well, you need to think of a new balance, okay? Humans are really good at the curation of context. In your domain, in your studios, you know tons about what your brand wants, about what your taste is, or within your own family, what your family context is. Machines are really good at content generation, and they're going to be better than you and get way better than you. So we need to focus on the fact that we have roughly a fixed intelligence. We need to focus on mapping our context and let machines do the heavy lifting. Play to your strengths is another way of saying it, right? AIs are necessarily useless without the context required to apply it. So focusing on what makes us human, right? Focusing on the practical wisdom we have within our domains is where our domain should, or what our focus should be on, and letting machines focus on the raw reasoning, let's say. Right? It's not better or worse. It's just a different type of intelligence. So the logic here is, for every task that you have, you need to focus on how can you augment your team? How can you build a centaur, right? How can you let human drive and the machine push, right? So this is a core reframe, right? When you're thinking about tasks that you have, processes that exist within your organization, what is the specific context that can drive content generation? Whether that's marketing or creating a design brief or creating CAD in the future, creating images, right? And think about, okay, who in my team, who should pay attention to what specific aspects of that task, right? Because most tasks have many different decisions, many different actions that need to be taken. And at the same time, you need to think about, okay, what is the model or the tool? Sometimes it's a tool that already exists. Sometimes it's an AI model that exists. Which one can apply to that specific decision? So again, what's the key takeaway here? It's not how do we eliminate more people from our team and replace them complete with AI. It's more how do we rebalance the human strengths with machine strengths. Okay, poor prioritization. The solution to that is to be really specific about what you want to automate. Okay, how can you start with an AI that helps the most, or an automation that helps the most, and very quickly? So the first step is mapping your problems. Right, you need to isolate sort of levers for potential momentum, creating momentum. So the first thing is, what's the objective? What are you trying to create? What is the workflow? What's the starting point? What's the end point? Okay. What are the tasks? What are the decisions embedded in those tasks? Who's actually doing the work? Right? mapping this out sort of gives you a structure to start identifying bottlenecks in your process, which are essentially automation opportunities, where you can sort of incorporate a smarter decision support tool, whether it's an existing tool or a new one that needs to be created. So again, what are the discrete tasks? And then within each of those tasks, what are all the decisions that exist, right? This is becoming a very laborious process, which is very difficult to do, or it takes a lot of time, but leads to a lot of often hidden opportunities, okay? So also a key thing to think about when you're thinking about the decisions within each of these tasks is like, who's responsible? What are the inputs and outputs for each of these people? How do they communicate? What are the relationships, the connections that exist within each of these tasks? Sometimes there's documents, sometimes it's images, sometimes there's nothing actually transferred. It's just a conversation, or nothing actually written down, rather, not recorded. It's a conversation. The idea behind this is to visualize and articulate all the connections related to the work that needs to be done. This is an important one, right? You need to figure out who owns all these decisions, right? Are they connected to incentives? If you're thinking about a sales process or you're thinking about a review process, there's politics and lots of interpersonal problems or politics that exist in all these decisions and all these jobs. And it's worthwhile mapping them out. Right? What you have to understand, what is the motivation to get this done? What are the barriers that are maybe hidden? And the second thing is to sort of really map this out, right? How do you map out all these dependencies between people and decisions and your big picture, right? Okay, so then the next step here is, how do you connect this to AI? How do you connect this to capabilities, okay? What's the thought process for each? So now you have all these decision mapped out. And the idea here is to think through, for each decision in the task we're trying to automate, what is the category of thinking that's required? Sometimes it's a classification task, or anomaly detection, or regression. These are different types of thinking related to questions that can help you identify what category of AI is required. At the bottom here, we have generative, but there's many different ways to use AIs to make a decision. So this is just an example, right? The idea here is to say, we've taken one potential decision, decision 3. There's many different cognitive processes that are included in that decision. So here we have an input. It's hard to see on this screen. It says, okay, is this a weird input? That's an anomaly detection problem. If it is, okay, what category of input is that? That's a classification task. Okay, depending on what category it is, you might need to create a work ticket or SOP based on the category. That's a generative task, and then it hands over to the next step. You can imagine doing this for all the different tasks we've outlined. You create a huge map of potential work. But once you've done something like that, you have a lot of rich context maps that you can share with someone, with a technical person, with a developer, with someone who's familiar with all these tools. And you can say very clearly what you want to automate, and you can measure it very clearly also. Okay, the next thing here is to prioritize them. If you've gone through that whole process, what should you focus on? Very likely, most of the decisions you've mapped out are maybe impossible to automate, not really technically feasible. The idea here is to sort of focus on, it's hard to see highlighted on the screen here, but the top right quadrant, right? Focus on the sections that are relatively important and relatively feasible, so you can get a quick win, okay? The key takeaway here is, that process looks a little bit complicated, but even doing a fraction of that helps you frame the context of your automation problem and helps you communicate it without any real technology knowledge, right? You're basically just communicating your context in detail in a way that maps your context and your values to someone who can automate something. Okay, unclear value prop, right? You need to define your end game. So using the example of one of the questions, one of the decisions. Okay, before the automation, you have a specific speed, cost, and accuracy. After the automation, what's your target? Right? Even just mapping like a relative measurement of these things helps you communicate to someone who's building a tool or someone who is using the tool what's really important to you. Because these three things change for every task and every decision within those tasks. Okay. The takeaway there is like define the delta you want. Okay. Time, error reduction, faster decisions, better forecasts, etc. Clear targets for each decision. Traumatic pasts. Okay. Scope a project pilot tightly. Right. If you build a series of micro wins, you're gonna build a lot of momentum. Okay, so basically isolating your risks, right? There's many ways to measure risk, but keep it simple, right? What's the user risk? Will people in my team adopt this automation if we create it? Is it feasible? Can we build this, right? Rank them all out of 10, multiply them together, you get a value. It's rough, but something's better than nothing. Okay, the next thing is verify those assumptions, right? When you're thinking about technical people who have building skills or skills with technology, they want to build. They want clear scope and boundaries. They want fuel in the tank and tracks to run on. So you need to verify risks so that they don't go in the wrong direction. Again, this is a little bit hard to see on the screen. And when you're talking to these types of people, you want to share that full scope. Right? If you've done the work to map it out and map out your sort of value ranking for all the decisions within that process, you're going to get a lot more feedback about what's actually feasible, and they're going to understand where you want to go. Okay, yeah, so the takeaway there is just keep it simple. Pick things that are low risk and high impact to start. Create something that's highly visible and set clear success criteria. So that feeds into the second last problem, right? No champion. You want to hook an eagle. Like an executive is like an eagle, right? They fly high, they scan the horizon, they see what all the problems are, but they need clear, actionable requests so they know how to support you and take action. The logic here is, in one page, you should be able to define your automations. What's the problem? What's the timing? What's your ROI estimate? What's your risk score? So they can make a clear decision and help you out and advocate on your behalf. The second thing is demonstrate your control of the approach. Even if you're wrong, if you've done the work to express the problem, express the full workflow, express all the decisions in that workflow and your your belief about what type of automation decision, what type of algorithm, classification, generation, etc., is required, and you have an idea about the delta or the change in potential from the old process versus the new process, they interpret that you understand the problem and you're in control of addressing a solution. So it's a great way to build trust and get buy-in, especially on risky new projects. And the last part, right, explain that ROI and risk. Show a rough calculation, even if it's wrong. Every model's wrong. Something's better than nothing. And the idea here is just to align the incentives, right? Make it clearly their win, not just your pitch. The last thing here is limited resources, right? The idea here is to refine your needs and what you perceive as your assets. Okay, you don't need a specialized AI team. Everything that we talked about here doesn't require extensive specialized AI knowledge. A lot of the tools are openly available to experiment with. So just having clear questions, organized data, and sort of an open mind will help you out a lot. The message here is upskill your team, right? There's a lot of external teams you can partner with, but your team has the most important thing with this, which is the contextual knowledge, right? Basically the idea here is that an internal talent, you have all the implicit understanding that's required, which is way more valuable than what an external team can bring to you. The second idea about your assets, right? the logic here is to invest in enriching the data assets you have, structuring your data, labeling it, making it accessible, enriching it with more context. It turns this into a unique asset that you can continue to leverage. Right? This graphic here is just saying a lot of the AI models that you're maybe familiar or working with, they're trained on the internet, and that data is sort of running out. They're expanding their capabilities by creating synthetic data sets, but the real value from all these AI models is when they get applied to a very niche context, right? And that requires your curated data assets. So this is a huge advantage if you've done this ahead of time. This is just sort of compounding on that idea to say, like if you look at ChatGPT in that bottom circle, right? Anything trained on the internet is becoming more valuable, right? They have extensive reasoning, ability to generate images, etc. But the value expands as you fine-tune these models on your information, and the more unique that information, the more valuable the model becomes to a specific niche use cases. Okay, yeah. I mean, the key takeaway here is being clear makes makes resourcefulness easier, right? You don't need an expert team. You need to refine the assets you have. Just a summary here. If you misunderstand AI, train your team to understand the fundamentals. What are the fundamental concepts? It's really easy to get caught in the weeds of all the new papers and all the new models that come out, but refine the training to just the things that are relevant to you. The first principles, let's say, of what's causing change. Amplify human strengths. Focus on the people. Focus on specific high-impact tasks that are attainable to automate. Really be clear on what your objective is. What's your automation objective? Focus on scoping very specific pilots. Get a senior leader, hook an eagle, and upskill and enrich your data. So again, this is the core takeaways, right? Managing attention, curating context, refining your tastes. What to embrace. This is basically it. I'm happy to talk about this more at any point. If we had more than an hour, it would be great to go through just a section of this. But again, the logic of this presentation is to say, the onus is on us as tool builders to build new tools, but the tools are only as good as the context you manage. I've been talking to some people in the audience today, and a lot of people in the last couple of days. In the past, design tools have been very complicated to learn. So you had to sort of learn how to manage a complex tool in order to express yourself. The interfaces are going to get simpler. The onus is going to be on the user to express their complex context. So everything that we've been talking about is in this presentation is, okay, to get you to think differently about how do you map your context. In designing AI tools, we're thinking a lot about, okay, what is the way that we can create an interface that allows you to express your context easier? That's going to become more important as well, but it's a two-sided game. Thank you.